Lower belly fat feels stubborn, but it actually isn't, and I'll show you why. Even if you're doing everything right, but you still can't see your abs, you're not failing, you're just in the hardest phase. See, fat loss happens in a fixed order. So in this video, I'll show you why the lower belly fat always is the last to go and how to stop sabotaging this phase that actually gets rid of it. Firstly, almost every man who tries to lose belly fat hits this same wall, usually around 20 to 15% body fat range. This is where you're eating good, you're training consistent, you've dropped a couple of jean sizes, and people are already giving you compliments, but it still feels like you're carrying a fanny pack, or bum bag as we say here in Australia, of fat right over the abs and the belly button area. So many guys start thinking something is wrong. Maybe their diet is wrong, or their training, or their body internally, which is all a possibility. And then the doubt creeps in and you change your plan again. You try to push harder, or you fall off the wagon until some shiny object appears again. Some guys start looking at things like Ozempic or TRT. And in the right cases, these can be useful tools, but they don't magically solve fat loss, because plenty of my clients used TRT and Ozempic and still needed a proper structure and coaching to lose the last bit and avoid regaining it. So my point is, frustration isn't a sign that you're failing. It means you're actually getting close, because the lower belly fat isn't the first thing to go, it's one of the last, and here's why. Your body does not care where you want to lose fat from. And you can see this clearly in a DEXA scan that shows where your body fat is actually located. So think of body fat as being split into 4 buckets. The first bucket is your head and neck, which usually holds around 5 to 6% of your total body fat. The second bucket is your arms, roughly about 10 to 15%. The third bucket is your legs, around 25 to 30%. And the biggest bucket by far is your trunk and torso, which typically holds somewhere between 45 to 50% of your total body fat in men. The thing is, the smaller buckets obviously empty quicker, and the biggest bucket takes the longest to empty. Obviously, lower belly fat is part of the torso, right, which is the largest bucket by a long shot. And this is why the other smaller buckets are going to look leaner sooner. And as you get leaner, this is obvious because the larger percentage of the remaining fat is still going to be between your chest and your belly button area. But many guys sabotage this. Every time you switch diets, the process resets. The big bucket fills up first, and then the smaller bucket. So it's not that lower belly fat is stubborn. It's protected by this order of where fat cells are majority located in the body. And to a degree, other influences which we will discuss in this video. But if you don't respect that order I just talked about, you will stay stuck yo-yoing for years. And here's a realistic time frame on this. So if you picture fat loss on a timeline, not as one event, technically fat is being lost from everywhere at the same time. But based on these 4 buckets, this is the order that most men are going to notice. So early on, the fat comes off your face and your neck. Then your arms will start to lean out. After that, you'll also notice your back, hips, and shoulders will start to tighten up. Then your chest and obliques and upper abs. And right down the end of this timeline is the lower abs. By this time you reach this part, you've already been dieting and training for months, possibly years, and that's completely normal. You look better, you feel better, but visually, progress can slow right down. And that slowdown feels like failure. And it doesn't help that even with lower belly fat, people are going to say to you,
"You are too skinny.
You need to eat more food.
You have an unhealthy obsession."
just ignore all that bullshit. But then you might start to loosen the diet on the weekends, stop tracking honestly, skip your workouts, miss your step count. And when that happens, you stall and move backwards on the time frame, delaying that lower belly fat phase into the future. And this is why lower belly fat can feel impossible for busy men, because it's right at the end of that timeline and life keeps interrupting before you can ever get there. But here's where it gets confusing, especially if you think you're doing everything right. Training hard doesn't automatically mean you're recovering well. Eating clean doesn't guarantee you're actually in a fat loss deficit. And tracking loosely isn't the same as tracking accurately. Doing better than before isn't the same as doing what is required to reach that last phase. And this is also where diet switching sneaks in. It could be true that your diet isn't optimal, whatever that means, but usually because slow starts to slow down, it's easy to think that something needs to change again. So you might cut more carbs and then your training starts to suffer. Or you try fasting, but then you overeat in your eating window. Or you do some extreme diet like keto, carnivore, or whatever, which quickly clashes with your work, your family, and your social life. But at this stage, it's rarely the method that is the problem. It's the precision and the consistency, right? Because when you're close to lean, small leaks matter as much as the big mistakes. And there's another thing that's going to make belly fat hold on for dear life that you need to watch out for. So these days, we see a lot of people blame low testosterone and high cortisol for why we're not losing belly fat. And that is not wrong, but it's also not the full story. Hormones don't change for no reason. They respond to the environment that your body is in right now. So with stress, when you're constantly switched on with work pressure, financial stress, screen exposure, conflict, toxic relationships, overtraining, etc., cortisol stays elevated. Now, cortisol does not magically create belly fat. There are plenty of hyper-stressed, skinny people. But what cortisol does is it drives hunger and eating behavior, especially later in the day. And here is proof. There's a study published in the International Journal of Obesity called Cortisol Secretion and Late Night Eating Behavior, which showed that higher cortisol levels were associated with increased appetite and a greater food intake in the evening hours. This explains why you might start sniffing around for snacks mid-afternoon, and sometimes that doesn't stop until bedtime. So consistently elevated stress doesn't just affect hormones, it quietly pushes your calories up, probably without you realizing it. But wait, there's another study.
Another one.
Titled Effect of Sleep Restriction on Testosterone Levels in Healthy Men. This one showed that just 1 week of sleeping 5 hours a night reduced testosterone by about 10 to 15%, and that is in young healthy men. And that drop happened without changes to diet or training, purely from reducing sleep in men who were not obese, not stressed, or hitting midlife and beyond. That test drop results in poor recovery, less muscle retention, harder to build muscle, and a softer looking midsection even when your calories are mostly controlled. And here's another overlooked issue.
And another one.
A study published in the Journal of Sport and Health Science showed that prolonged sitting worsens your insulin sensitivity, and that breaking up sitting with light movement improves insulin sensitivity and blood sugar responses, even in people who train regularly. If most of your movement only happens in the gym and the rest of your day is spent on your ass, then your insulin sensitivity is going to drop, which makes your body more likely to store more calories rather than burning them off. So it isn't really about bad hormones. It's about the habits that create a hormonal environment that increases hunger, reduces your recovery, and makes lower belly fat easier to gain and harder to lose. And the good news is, when you fix your habits, the hormones eventually start to take care of themselves anyway. So losing lower belly fat is possible for anyone, but that doesn't mean that you can completely avoid these next challenges I'll cover next. So by the time you're close to losing that last bit of belly fat and you're starting to see your abs pop, the challenge isn't just physical. See, fat loss is ultimately simple. You're in a calorie deficit, you're training, you're moving more. You can't avoid those fundamentals unless you're insane. But the harder challenge is what you can't see, because staying consistent when progress is slows or stalling is much harder mentally than it is when results are coming really quickly in the beginning. There are phases where it looks like nothing is happening, even though internally there is things happening. And this is exactly where that shiny object syndrome starts to show up. You start questioning your plan and you second guess the diet, looking at what other people are doing, and only because your patience is being tested. And this is why feelings are such a bad guide through the fat loss journey. How you feel tells you nothing about what's actually happening. And that is why I rely strictly on biofeedback data to act like a GPS with all of my clients. And this includes weekly average scale trends, regular waist measurements and photos, your step count, your sleep quality, your food and calorie burn, as well as your protein intake, your workout sets, reps, and weights that you're doing on a progression, your subcutaneous fat and your visceral fat ratio, the muscle to fat ratio, and blood test data. Everything that matters is measurable, and data doesn't get emotional, it doesn't panic or lie to you. Now, I'm not saying be an emotionless robot. You can feel frustrated and impatient and annoyed and still make the right data-driven decisions, just like you do in every other area of life. Because consistency, not motivation, is what finally burns off the lower belly fat. And that only happens when you stack the habits I'm about to explain next. Now, since lower belly fat is the last to go, pushing to extremes to quickly get it done is a common reaction I see all the time, but I don't recommend it. Because the harder you push to get there, the harder you will rebound after you pass the finish line. So instead, you want to protect your consistency for long enough so that last phase happens gradually, and then it's going to feel totally normal and sustainable for you. And this comes down to a small habit stack. First, and I know I keep saying this, but you have to protect your sleep. This whole process is much harder when you're not getting decent sleep. Earlier nights, less alcohol, no phone scrolling in bed. Sleep is going to help your hunger, your recovery, and your hormones stay in check. And a lack of sleep, well, you know the answer to that. Second, drop any unnecessary stress where you can. I'm not saying eliminate stress, but don't add to it by stacking unnecessary stress to your life, like biting off more than you can chew, entertaining other people's problems that you can't solve, setting crazy, unrealistic goals and time frames to 10x your life. Also, ask for help. Life is not a solo sport. No one cares if you crush yourself in the process. And if you keep adding more stress to your plate, stress eating will kick in, energy is going to drop, and then staying the path feels impossible at times. The third thing is to increase your slow burn with increased daily movement outside of the gym. This is simple steps, short walks. 10 minutes after a meal of walking is proven to improve your digestion and your insulin sensitivity. And breaking up long sitting periods, even with a 2 or 3 minute standing break, is going to help. It's that constant slow burn throughout the day that is eating away at your fat cells when you're in a deficit. And the truth is that last bit can feel like a grind. So it's really better to just cruise into it without overcooking yourself. And the fourth habit is to track your data so you know whether you're moving forward or not. This is not to punish yourself, but to remove the emotion from the decision-making criteria, right? Don't pretend that you're eating well or you're moving a lot when the data clearly says otherwise. You know, posting a screenshot of a 60-minute 4 a.m. run on Facebook means nothing if you're on your ass for 15 hours of the rest of the day. So just keep showing up, mate, like you do for your work, your family, like brushing your damn teeth every day, whatever. If you've been stuck in this lower belly fat phase before and you're tired of second guessing yourself, that is exactly what I help men with inside my Metabolic Recomp coaching. We remove the guesswork, set up the right nutrition, the right workouts and habits for your schedule and your goals, and use a data-driven system to keep you accountable to it when motivation fades. If you want help implementing this properly to get and stay lean, there's a link in the description where you can learn more about how it works. Once you've checked that out, watch this video next where I'll break down the correct way to get to 15% body fat without wrecking your schedule.